The dark truth behind Rapunzel. A real woman's tragic story locked in a tower, her freedom stolen, a prince climbing her golden braids. We all know the fairy tale of Rapunzel. But what if I told you this wasn't just a story invented to entertain children? What if Rapunzel was real? Hidden beneath the familiar fairy tale lies the shadow of something far older and far darker, the true story of a real woman imprisoned for her beliefs, her long hair shorn as punishment, whose bones may still lie beneath an altar to this very day. The fairy tale buried the truth, but not deep enough. Today, we're going to unearth the real Rapunzel and discover how a 3rd-century martyr story evolved into one of our most beloved children's tales. But be warned, the truth is far more disturbing than the Brothers Grimm ever let on. Welcome back, dark history lovers. Before we unravel the shocking truth behind Rapunzel, let's revisit the tale we think we know. Once upon a time, a husband and wife lived beside a high-walled garden owned by a witch. When the wife became pregnant, she developed an obsession with a single herb growing in that forbidden garden, rampion, also called Rapunzel. She craved nothing else and began wasting away. Desperate, her husband climbed the wall under cover of night and stole the herb. But the witch caught him. Her eyes glowed like coals as she made him a terrible bargain. He could take as much rampion as he needed, but in exchange, she would claim his unborn child. When the baby was born, the sorceress came as promised. She named the girl Rapunzel and carried her away. Rapunzel grew into a child of otherworldly beauty with hair like spun sunlight. But when she turned 12, the witch locked her in a tower deep in the forest. There were no stairs, no door, just a single circular room with one high window. Each day, the sorceress would call, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair," and climb the golden braid that reached the forest floor. Years passed until a prince heard Rapunzel singing and discovered the witch's secret. He began visiting her nightly, and they fell in love. Together, they planned her escape. He would bring silk strands so she could weave a ladder. But their plan was discovered when Rapunzel innocently revealed her pregnancy to the witch. Enraged, the sorceress cut off Rapunzel's braid and banished her to the wilderness. When the prince arrived that night, he found the witch waiting. In despair, he threw himself from the tower, falling into thorns that blinded him. For years, the prince wandered sightless until he heard Rapunzel singing again. He found her with their twin children, born in exile. Her tears of joy restored his sight, and they returned to his kingdom to live happily ever after. This was the version recorded by the Brothers Grimm in 1812. But their aim wasn't to create children's entertainment. They wanted to preserve ancient German folk tales. When their collection unexpectedly became popular with families, later editions softened the story, removing the pregnancy subplot and adding a marriage proposal. But the Grimms weren't the first to tell this tale. In 1634, Italian writer Giambattista Basile published Petronella, a story remarkably similar to Rapunzel. The girl is stolen from her parents, locked in a tower, and lets down her braid so her captor can climb up. But this time, the villain isn't a witch, it's an ogress. And Petronella isn't passive. She's clever and escapes using 3 magical acorns that transform into fierce animals to distract her pursuer. Then in 1698, French author Charlotte Rose de Caumont de la Force wrote Persian, the version that introduced the most haunting elements we recognize today. The secret pregnancy, the villain's cruel deception, the prince's blinding fall, the twin children born in exile, and the miraculous tears that restore sight. Notice the pattern in these names. Petronella and Persian both mean parsley. Rapunzel comes from campanula, a wild European bellflower whose leaves were eaten like spinach and whose roots were crisp like radishes. These weren't children's stories. They were tales of desire, consequence, and the price of forbidden longing. The craving for a simple herb dooms an unborn child, calling to mind Eve reaching for forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden. But what if these fairy tales preserved the memory of a real woman whose story was too important to forget? Her name was Barbara, daughter of a wealthy nobleman in 3rd century Heliopolis, now Baalbek in modern Lebanon. She lived during the reign of Emperor Maximian, when Christianity was spreading despite brutal persecution. Barbara was intelligent, devout, and beautiful. When her father attempted to arrange her marriage to a Persian nobleman, she refused. For this defiance, he locked her in a tower within their home, the first parallel to our fairy tale. But instead of breaking Barbara's will, the solitude only strengthened it. Alone in that tower, she secretly converted to Christianity, rejecting her father's pagan beliefs. While her father was away, Barbara discovered builders working on a new bathhouse. She instructed them to make a small but symbolic change, adding a third window to the south-facing wall as a representation of the Holy Trinity. When her father returned and saw what she had done, he flew into a murderous rage. Barbara was arrested and brought before Roman authorities, who ordered her tortured. She was beaten, burned, and her skin torn with iron hooks. Still, she refused to renounce her faith. Before her execution, Barbara's long hair was shorn as a final humiliation, another direct parallel to Rapunzel's story. And then came the ultimate betrayal. It was her own father who led her to a hilltop and beheaded her with his own hands. According to legend, divine justice followed swiftly. Barbara's father was struck dead by lightning immediately after killing his daughter. Barbara was buried by a Christian named Valentines, and her tomb became known as a place of miracles. She was remembered as a martyr, and her story spread throughout the Roman Empire and beyond. But here's where the story becomes complicated. Some scholars claim Barbara never existed at all. Her earliest known biography doesn't appear until the 7th century, 400 years after her supposed death. During this period, her tale spread across Europe, retold and embellished in texts like the Golden Legend, a medieval bestseller that transformed saints into symbols. In 1969, the Catholic Church quietly removed St. Barbara's feast day from the official calendar, citing insufficient historical evidence. Yet her story persists, and the evidence for her existence is intriguing. Barbara's timing aligns perfectly with documented periods of Christian persecution. The Lebanese still celebrate her feast day every year, dressing in costume, baking traditional sweets, and retelling her story. Her city, her father's role, the bathhouse, they're all grounded in real historical context. Bathhouses were cornerstone of Roman elite culture, especially in wealthy provinces like Syria. Just beyond Barbara's supposed city of Baalbek stands a remarkable Roman nymphaeum, a monumental fountain complex built around a natural spring. Carved into the hillside with sophisticated engineering, it features the figure of a goddess etched in stone. This could be the very bathhouse from Barbara's story, or at least represents the kind of sacred site where such legends take root. Perhaps the story of this carved goddess, centuries older than Christianity, was later absorbed and reshaped into the figure we know as Saint Barbara. But then there's the most compelling evidence of all, Barbara's body. According to tradition, her remains were moved to Constantinople in the 6th century. In 1108, these relics were given as part of a royal dowry when the daughter of Byzantine Emperor Alexios I Komnenos married a Kievan prince. The saint's body traveled to Kiev, where it was enshrined in a church and never left. Today, those remains still rest beneath the golden dome of St. Vladimir's Cathedral, encased in glass, visited by thousands of pilgrims each year. Centuries after the church declared her story historically uncertain, Barbara's body remains. You can see it, you can visit it. But this raises a haunting question. If Barbara never existed, whose body is this? Whoever this woman was, her remains were considered sacred enough, valuable enough to be given as part of a royal marriage alliance. Her story was important enough to preserve through centuries of political upheaval and religious transformation. Could these be the bones of the real Rapunzel, a Christian woman imprisoned by her pagan father, shorn of her hair as punishment, and executed for her beliefs? The Rapunzel motif appears across cultures and centuries. In the 10th century Persian epic Shahnameh, the noblewoman Radaba falls in love with Prince Zal. Unable to reach her tower, she lets down her long black hair, inviting him to climb it. But Zal refuses, fearing he might hurt her, and uses a rope instead, a moment of surprising tenderness in ancient literature. In Norse mythology, the goddess Sif was renowned for her flowing golden hair until Loki cut it off while she slept. In penance, he commissioned dwarves to forge new hair from threads of real gold. Scholars believe Sif's hair symbolized golden wheat and harvest abundance. Curiously, the Brothers Grimm noted that in old Germanic poetry, gold was sometimes called Sif's hair. Even stranger, there exists a plant known as Sif's hair, a golden, moss-like herb scientifically identified as Polytrichum aureum. This brings us back to Rapunzel, also named after a plant and defined by her golden hair. Then there's Danae in Greek mythology, daughter of King Acrisius of Argos. When prophecy warned that his grandson would kill him, Acrisius locked Danae in a sealed chamber, or in some versions, a tower. But Zeus found her, slipping through as golden rain. Danae became pregnant, giving birth to Perseus, who eventually fulfilled the prophecy. Across myth and history, this motif repeats. A girl hidden away to keep her pure, to prevent prophecy, to control her fate. But isolation offers no protection. The very thing they try to prevent still happens. It's a pattern rooted in humanity's deepest fears and desires, the tension between protection and imprisonment, between love and possession, between destiny and free will. How did Saint Barbara's story transform into Rapunzel's fairy tale? Over centuries, fragments of her legend seeped into local folklore. The tower imprisonment, the defiant daughter, the father's rage, the shorn hair, these powerful images evolved and blended with other cultural motifs. The herb craving may have been added to explain the tower imprisonment in terms medieval audiences could understand. A parent's debt leading to a child's captivity. The witch replaced the pagan father as Christianity spread and old religions became associated with evil magic. The prince and romantic love transformed a story of religious martyrdom into one of earthly desire. The happy ending provided hope that even the darkest situations could be overcome. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this transformation is how it preserved the story's essential truth. Both Barbara and Rapunzel are imprisoned women who refuse to submit. Both face punishment for their defiance. Both suffer the symbolic violence of having their hair cut. The fairy tale kept alive the memory of a woman who chose faith over family, principle over peace, death over compromise. In a world where women's voices were often silenced, her story survived by hiding in plain sight. So was Rapunzel real? In St. Barbara's Church in Kiev, beneath the Golden Dome, lies the body of a woman whose story has echoed through centuries. Whether she was the historical Barbara or simply a Christian martyr whose story became legend, her influence is undeniable. The fairy tale of Rapunzel isn't just entertainment. It's collective memory, cultural DNA passed down through generations. It carries the echo of real women who faced impossible choices, who paid terrible prices for their beliefs, who found ways to make their voices heard even from the tops of towers. Every time we tell the story of Rapunzel, we honor not just a fairy tale character, but the real women whose courage and defiance shaped the stories we tell our children. In their tower prisons, in their moments of choice, in their refusal to be silenced, they remind us that sometimes the most powerful act of rebellion is simply refusing to let your story die. The tower may imprison the body, but it cannot contain the spirit. And sometimes, that spirit finds a way to climb down from its prison on a braid of golden hair, carrying its truth into the world below.